I never thought I'd be traveling alone at 55, but here I was, sitting at Gate B-17 in Dallas Love Field, waiting for my flight to Kansas City. 6 months since the divorce was finalized, and I was still adjusting to this new reality. The wedding ring tan line had finally faded, but the habit of reaching for my phone to text Linda about travel delays hadn't. This trip was important. Meeting with Hartwell Agricultural Distributors could mean expanding our territory into Missouri and Iowa. After 23 years selling farm equipment, I knew a good opportunity when I saw one. The divorce settlement had been expensive, and I needed this deal to work out. I was scrolling through emails on my phone, squinting at the small text even with my reading glasses, when I noticed him. Mid-40s maybe, thin build, wearing a faded Cardinals baseball cap and a wrinkled button-down shirt. He was sitting 3 seats away, but something felt off. He wasn't reading, wasn't on his phone, just sitting there, occasionally glancing in my direction. When our eyes met, he smiled and nodded like we were old acquaintances. I gave a polite nod back, the way you do with strangers, and returned to my phone. But I could feel his attention like heat from a campfire. Randolph Pemberton? I looked up, startled. He was standing right next to me now, that same unsettling smile on his face. I'm sorry, do we know each other? I asked, closing my laptop bag protectively. Vernon Kingswell, he said, extending his hand. His palm was damp. I saw your name on the boarding list. You're going to Kansas City too, right? For business? The fact that he'd seen the boarding list bothered me, but I shook his hand anyway. That's right, agricultural equipment sales. Fascinating field, he said, settling into the empty seat beside me without invitation. I used to work in insurance, farm policies actually, a lot of crossover in our industries. Something about his manner reminded me of the guys who'd hang around the dealership too long, asking too many questions, making the secretaries uncomfortable. I'd learned to trust those instincts over the years. Well, I said, standing up to create some distance. I should probably grab some coffee before we board. Oh, they've got coffee service on the plane, Vernon said quickly. Southwest always does, no need to rush. But I was already walking away, my bad knee protesting slightly. At the coffee kiosk, I bought a large black coffee and took my time stirring in cream, watching him from the corner of my eye. He was still in my seat, looking through what appeared to be a small notebook. When boarding began, I made sure to get in line early. Old habit from years of business travel. Vernon appeared right behind me, close enough that I could smell his cologne mixed with something else, maybe nervous sweat. Funny coincidence, he said as we shuffled forward. Linda mentioned you might be doing more traveling now that you're on your own. My blood went cold. I stopped walking so abruptly that the woman behind us bumped into me. What did you say? Your ex-wife, Linda Pemberton? Well, Linda Morrison now, I suppose. We have mutual friends. The line kept moving, but I felt frozen. Linda had gone back to her maiden name after the divorce, but how would this stranger know that? And who were these mutual friends? I don't think that's possible, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Vernon just smiled and tapped his notebook. Small world, Randy. Can I call you Randy? That's what Linda used to call you, right? Before things went sideways with the ranch and all. Now I was genuinely scared. The ranch details, Linda's pet name for me. This wasn't public information. On the plane, I found my seat, 14A, grateful for the aisle to accommodate my knee. Vernon walked past toward the back, but not before leaning down and whispering, "See you in Kansas City, Randy." I spent the first 20 minutes of the flight trying to figure out how he could know so much about my personal life. LinkedIn showed my job title and company, but not my divorce details. The ranch wasn't mentioned anywhere online that I knew of. About halfway through the flight, I got up to use the restroom. When I returned, Vernon was sitting in the middle seat next to mine, chatting with the woman who'd been there before. "Hope you don't mind," he said as I approached. "Margaret here was kind enough to switch with me. I told her we were old friends catching up." The woman smiled at me apologetically as she gathered her things. "He said you two went way back." I wanted to contradict him, but what could I say? That this man was lying about knowing me? It would sound paranoid. Instead, I forced a smile and settled back into my seat, my skin crawling as Vernon made himself comfortable beside me. "So," he said, pulling out that notebook again, "tell me about the kids. Jessica's in Portland now, right? And Michael's finishing up at Texas A&M? I gripped the armrest so hard my knuckles went white. My children's names, their locations. How could he possibly know this? "I'm sorry," I said, trying to keep my voice calm, "but I really don't feel comfortable discussing my family with someone I don't know." Vernon's smile never wavered. "But Randy, we're going to know each other very well. I have a feeling this is just the beginning of a beautiful friendship." The rest of the flight passed in tense silence. Vernon occasionally scribbled in his notebook, and once, when I thought he wasn't looking, I glimpsed what appeared to be a rough map with my ranch's address written at the top. When we landed in Kansas City, I grabbed my carry-on and rushed off the plane, not looking back. But at baggage claim, there he was again, standing across the carousel with no luggage of his own, just watching me with that same unnerving smile. I collected my bag quickly and headed for the taxi line, but my hands were shaking as I tried to call an Uber instead. The app kept crashing, and in my frustration, I didn't notice Vernon approaching until he was right beside me again. "Having trouble with technology?" he asked. "I could give you a ride. I've got a rental car." "No, thank you," I said firmly, finally getting the Uber app to work. "I've got transportation arranged." "Embassy Suites downtown, right? That's where all the agricultural equipment salesmen stay." My Uber couldn't come fast enough. As we pulled away from the airport, I kept checking the rear window. No sign of Vernon, but my heart was still racing. How had he known about the Embassy Suites? I'd made that reservation just 2 days ago through the company's preferred booking system. During the 20-minute ride downtown, I tried to rationalize what was happening. Maybe Vernon really did know Linda somehow. She'd had a wide circle of friends during our marriage. Maybe he was just one of those overly friendly travelers who remembered details well. But deep down, I knew this wasn't normal social interaction. This felt predatory. At the hotel, I checked in quickly, grateful when the desk clerk handed me my key card without announcing my room number aloud. Room 847, 8th floor, toward the back. I took the elevator up, constantly glancing over my shoulder. My room was standard business traveler fare. King bed, desk, view of the parking garage. I deadbolted the door immediately and put on the security chain, something I'd never felt the need to do in 20-plus years of business travel. I ordered room service for dinner, not wanting to venture out, and spent the evening reviewing my presentation for tomorrow's meeting with Hartwell Distributors. Around 10:30 p.m., the hotel phone rang. I almost didn't answer. Who would call me on the room line? But thinking it might be the front desk, I picked up. "Randy, it's your new friend Vernon." The blood drained from my face. "How did you get this number?" "I'm right down the hall, buddy. Room 854. "Isn't that convenient? When you didn't show up for that drink we discussed, I thought I'd give you a call." We never discussed any drink. I hung up immediately and called the front desk. "This is Mr. Pemberton in 847. There's a man in room 854 who's been bothering me. Can you please verify he's actually a guest?" The desk clerk put me on hold for several minutes. When she returned, her voice was apologetic. "I'm sorry, sir, but I can't find any guest registered to room 854. That room shows as vacant tonight." My hands started shaking again. If he wasn't registered, how was he calling from that room? How had he gotten into the hotel? I spent a sleepless night, jumping at every sound in the hallway. Every time the elevator dinged, I wondered if it was Vernon. I kept the desk chair propped against the door and my phone charged and ready to call 911. The next morning, I left early for my meeting, taking the stairs instead of the elevator and exiting through a side door near the Eways restaurant. The morning air felt like freedom after that suffocating hotel room. The meeting with Hartwell Distributors went well. They were interested in our new line of compact tractors for smaller farms. But even while discussing quarterly projections and delivery schedules, part of my mind kept wondering where Vernon was and what he was planning. After the meeting, I decided to grab lunch at a small diner a few blocks from the Hartwell building. I needed to think clearly about what to do next. Should I call the police? What would I tell them? That a man from my flight was being overly friendly. I was halfway through my hamburger when Vernon slid into the booth across from me. "How'd the meeting go, Randy? Hartwell's been struggling lately. Crop prices down, farmers cutting back on equipment purchases, but you probably knew that." This time, I didn't try to be polite. "You need to stop following me. This is harassment." Vernon opened his notebook and laid it on the table between us. I could see pages of handwritten notes, copies of what looked like property records, even a printed photo of my ranch house. "I've been doing some research on your situation," he said calmly. "Tough divorce. Linda really took you to the cleaners, didn't she? Half the ranch, spousal support, Plus, she got the good lawyer. Must be hard starting over at 55. How do you know all this? Public records, mostly. Divorce filings, property transfers, court documents. It's amazing what you can find if you know where to look. Like this LinkedIn post from last month. He showed me a printout of something I'd written about embracing new chapters after major life changes. You've been stalking my online presence. I prefer to think of it as taking an interest. See, Randy, I know what it's like to lose everything. To have people you trust turn their backs on you. I got fired from my insurance job 6 months ago. Inappropriate workplace behavior, they called it. Just like you, I'm trying to rebuild. The way he said, just like you, made my skin crawl. I started to get up, but Vernon reached across the table and grabbed my wrist. Don't walk away from me, Randy. We're going to be great friends. I can help you through this difficult time. I know all about starting over. I yanked my arm free and stood up. Stay away from me, or I'm calling the police. Vernon just smiled. Call them. Tell them what exactly? That a fellow traveler has been friendly? That someone took an interest in your business success? I threw $20 on the table and walked out, Vernon's laughter following me to the street. At the airport, I checked in for my return flight 3 hours early and went through security as quickly as possible. I found a gate in a different terminal and sat with my back to the wall, constantly scanning the crowds. But as my flight began boarding, there was Vernon again, standing in line just a few passengers behind me. He had no boarding pass, visible, but somehow he'd made it through security. That's when I snapped. I walked directly to the nearest TSA agent. That man in the Cardinals cap, I said, pointing Vernon out. He's been following me since Dallas. He knows details about my personal life he shouldn't know. He's shown up everywhere I've been, and I don't think he has a ticket for this flight. The agent took me seriously, probably because I looked as rattled as I felt. Within minutes, they'd pulled Vernon aside for questioning. I watched from a distance as he argued with them, his notebook confiscated, his pleasant demeanor finally cracking. It turned out he had no boarding pass for my flight. He'd somehow gotten a day pass to access the secure area. When they searched his belongings, they found detailed notes about my divorce, my children, my business schedule, even a Google Earth printout of my ranch with what looked like surveillance plans marked on it. The police arrived and arrested Vernon for stalking and trespassing. One officer told me he'd been fired from his insurance job for obsessive behavior toward male clients going through divorces. I made it home to Dallas that night, but I still check my rearview mirror more than I used to. I've made my social media profiles private, and I'm more careful about what personal information I share online. The Hartwell deal went through. That new distributor relationship has been profitable. But sometimes when I'm traveling alone in airports or hotels, I remember Vernon's smile and the way he said we'd be great friends. Some predators don't want your money or your possessions. Sometimes they want something much more unsettling. They want your life, your story, your vulnerabilities. And in an age where so much of our personal information is just a few clicks away, guys like Vernon are out there waiting to find their next target. I sleep better now, but I still keep that hotel room chair propped against the door when I travel. Because men like Vernon Kingswell are real, and sometimes they pick you for reasons you'll never understand. 25 years in the tower, from O'Hare's chaos to Memphis freight runs, and I thought Riverside Regional would be my quiet pre-retirement posting. Lorna needed specialist care only available downstate, and at 52, I figured I'd earned the right to some peace. The kids were settled in college, Cassie finishing her senior year at Mizzou, Mitch halfway through engineering at Purdue. After a quarter century of coordinating jumbo jets and managing crisis after crisis, a sleepy regional airport along the Mississippi seemed like the perfect wind down. I should have known better. Riverside Regional sat nestled between endless soybean fields and the muddy curves of the old river. Most nights on the graveyard shift, I'd handle maybe 3 cargo runs and the occasional charter flight. The tower was my glass sanctuary, perched above a single runway that stretched like a dark ribbon across the Missouri farmland. Below, the beacon swept its eternal circle, a lighthouse for the few souls brave enough to fly these empty skies after midnight. The solitude didn't bother me. After decades of constant radio chatter and split-second decisions, the quiet felt earned. Lorna's condition was stabilizing with the new treatments, and the slower pace meant I could actually be home for her morning appointments. Some of the younger controllers back in Chicago had called my transfer giving up, but they'd understand someday. Family comes first. That October night started routine enough. Vernon Dalworth, our security chief, had made his usual rounds before settling into the break room with his thermos of coffee and yesterday's newspaper. Vernon was old school, Vietnam vet who'd been watching over Riverside since the Carter administration. If something was amiss on his watch, he'd know it. Around 2:30 a.m., I picked up an inbound cargo hauler on approach. "Riverside Tower, this is Freight Dog 77 Alpha, requesting clearance for runway 16, came the pilot's voice, professional but tired. 77 Alpha, Riverside Tower, you're cleared for landing runway 16. Wind calm, visibility unlimited. I settled back in my chair, watching the aircraft's lights pierce the darkness. Standard milk run from Memphis to St. Louis, probably carrying auto parts or pharmaceuticals. As the twin-engine turboprop descended, its landing lights illuminated the runway approach. That's when I saw him. A figure stood motionless in the center of the runway, directly in the aircraft's path. Tall, gaunt, wearing what appeared to be dark clothing that seemed to absorb the light rather than reflect it. He wasn't moving, wasn't reacting to the approaching plane, just standing there like some twisted scarecrow. 77 Alpha, execute immediate go-around, obstruction on runway. My voice cracked as I grabbed the binoculars, hands suddenly slick with sweat. Copy go-around, what kind of obstruction? The pilot's engine roared as he applied power, banking sharply to avoid what should have been a catastrophic collision. I focused the binoculars on the runway, my heart hammering against my ribs. The figure was gone, completely gone, as if it had never been there at all. Stand by, 77 Alpha. I keyed the radio to security. Vernon, this is Randy in the tower. Need you to do a runway check immediately. Possible pedestrian incursion. Vernon's pickup was rolling within minutes, his headlights sweeping across the asphalt like searchlights hunting for answers. I watched from above as he drove the length of the runway twice, even got out to examine the center line where I'd seen the figure standing. His radio crackled to life 20 minutes later. Randy, I've been up and down this strip 3 times. Found some deer tracks in the grass, but that's it. You sure about what you saw? I stared down at the empty runway, doubt creeping into my mind like fog rolling off the river. 25 years of experience, and I'd never questioned my own eyes before. But the alternative, that I'd nearly caused a plane crash over a hallucination, was worse than admitting uncertainty. Roger that, Vernon. Must have been shadows playing tricks. But even as I said it, I knew it was a lie. I knew what I'd seen. The rest of my shift crawled by in paranoid alertness. Every shadow seemed to move. Every gust of wind sounded like whispers. When Beaumont Carmichael arrived for the day shift at 6 a.m., I'd never been happier to see another human being. You look like hell, Randy, Beau observed, settling into his chair with his usual casual grace. Rough night? I almost told him. Almost explained about the figure, the impossible vanishing act, the gnawing certainty that something was terribly wrong. Instead, I just shrugged. Quiet night. See you tomorrow. The drive home usually took 20 minutes through winding country roads that followed the river's ancient meanders. That morning, the familiar route felt different, charged with an electric tension that raised the hair on my arms. About halfway to town, I noticed the dark sedan in my rearview mirror. At first, I dismissed it as coincidence. Small towns have limited routes, and plenty of folks commute toward Riverside for work at the grain elevator or the barge loading facility. But when I took a deliberate turn onto County Road 47, a meandering farm road that led nowhere but to Old Henderson's abandoned dairy, the sedan followed without hesitation. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. 25 years of managing crisis situations had taught me to trust my instincts, and every fiber of my being screamed danger. I accelerated, watching the speedometer climb past safe limits for these narrow roads. The sedan matched my pace effortlessly. I thought about Lorna, probably awake now and wondering why I was late. Her morning medication routine was precise. The neurologist had been clear about timing with her MS treatment. She'd be worried, maybe even trying to call my cell phone that got no signal out here in the rural dead zones. Rather than lead this nightmare to my front door, I looped back toward town, taking random turns through residential streets until the sedan finally peeled off near the old Riverside Diner. I sat in my truck for 10 minutes in the empty parking lot of Murphy's Feed Store, engine running, before I felt safe enough to go home. Lorna was in the kitchen when I arrived, already dressed for her appointment with Dr. Brennan. She looked up from her pill organizer with that mixture of concern and gentle reproach I'd grown to know so well. "You're late. Everything okay at the airport?" Her voice carried that slight slur that appeared when she was tired, another reminder of why we'd made this move. "Just some unusual traffic." I kissed her forehead, inhaling the familiar scent of her lavender shampoo. "Sorry to worry you." I wanted to tell her about the figure on the runway, about the sedan that had followed me home. But Lorna had enough to worry about without adding her husband's possible hallucinations to the list. Instead, I helped her to the car and drove her to her appointment, scanning the rearview mirror the entire way. That afternoon, I managed only 3 hours of restless sleep before my alarm dragged me back to consciousness. The house felt different somehow, too quiet, too still. Lorna was napping in the living room, her afternoon medication making her drowsy. I checked the locks twice before leaving for work. The second night started normally enough. Vernon made his rounds, Beaumont handed over a quiet shift summary, and I settled into the familiar rhythm of watching empty skies. But around 1 a.m. the feeling started, a crawling sensation between my shoulder blades, like being observed by unseen eyes. I found myself constantly turning from the radar screen to scan the runway below. The beacon's sweep created shifting patterns of light and shadow that seemed to writhe with malevolent life. Twice, I thought, I glimpsed movement near the tree line, but the binoculars revealed only wind-blown branches. At 2:47 a.m., an emergency call crackled through the radio. "Riverside Tower, this is Citation 82 Quebec, declaring emergency, engine failure, requesting immediate clearance for emergency landing." My training kicked in instantly. "Citation 82, Quebec, Riverside Tower, you're cleared for emergency landing runway 16. Emergency vehicles are being notified." I hit the alarm button that would summon Vernon and the volunteer fire department. As the business jet descended on its desperate approach, its landing lights once again illuminated the runway. And there he was, the same tall figure standing in exactly the same spot, motionless and impossibly dark against the bright asphalt. This time, I didn't hesitate. "Citation 82, Quebec, go around immediately, obstacle on runway." "Negative, Tower, single engine, no power to go around. We're coming in." I watched in horror as the jet descended, towards certain catastrophe, its pilot fighting to control a crippled aircraft while an impossible figure stood directly in its path. At the last second, the very last possible moment, the figure simply wasn't there anymore. The jet touched down hard, but safely, its good engine screaming in reverse thrust. Vernon's voice exploded over the radio. "Randy, what the hell are you doing? There's nothing on that runway." I stared down at the empty asphalt, my hands shaking so violently I could barely key the microphone. The pilot of Citation 82 Quebec was already demanding an explanation for my phantom obstacle call. Vernon was racing toward the tower, his face a mask of confusion and growing anger. But I knew what I'd seen. Both times. The same impossible figure, appearing and vanishing like smoke, standing precisely where an aircraft would make contact with the ground. And somewhere in my gut, beneath the professional embarrassment and personal terror, I understood with crystal clarity that this thing, whatever it was, wasn't finished with me yet. As Vernon's boots thundered up the tower stairs and the radio erupted with confused voices demanding explanations I couldn't provide, I thought about Lorna sleeping peacefully at home, about Cassie and Mitch, safe in their distant dormitories, about 25 years of professional reputation about to crumble because of something that couldn't possibly exist. The worst part wasn't the fear. The worst part was knowing that when I drove home in a few hours, I'd be looking for that dark sedan again. And this time, I wasn't sure I'd be lucky enough to lose it. Vernon Caldwell's spine felt like broken glass after 8 hours in Flight 847's middle seat. At 56, these Denver medical equipment conferences were becoming harder to endure, especially when November storms turned routine trips into ordeals. His outdated iPhone showed 11:43 p.m. and 4 missed calls from Diane. Kansas City International felt abandoned, fluorescent lights buzzing over empty corridors like a ghost town. He dragged his broken-wheeled Samsonite toward ground transportation, each click echoing off polished floors. Diane would be worried sick. Their daughter Rachel's 25th birthday party started at 8 a.m., and he'd promised to help with setup. The official taxi queue had maybe 6 people under bright yellow signage. Professional, regulated, safe. "Vernon Caldwell?" He spun around. A tall man emerged from shadows beyond the pickup columns, wearing an unmarked reflective vest. Clean-shaven, expensive watch, predatory smile. The fact that he knew Vernon's name sent ice through his veins. "Executive Transport Service," the man said, flashing a homemade laminated badge. "Corporate account with Meridian Medical. I'm Roscoe. Dispatch sent me for pickup." Vernon's sales instincts screamed danger. No legitimate service ambushed passengers. "I didn't arrange any pickup." Roscoe's smile widened, showing too many teeth. "Standing corporate contract, sir. Check your travel docs. Confirmation MX4477. Vernon didn't move. Something was wrong with the math. Meridian was a mid-sized company. They didn't have standing contracts with luxury car services. And how did this stranger know his employer? "I'll take the taxi line." "Those yellow cabs? $60 minimum to Overland Park. Our corporate rate is $35 flat." Roscoe stepped closer, blocking Vernon's path to the official queue. "GPS direct, no scenic routes." The mention of his specific suburb made Vernon's mouth go dry. Too much information, too convenient. "Your vehicle is where?" "Executive lot, Section C, climate control, Wi-Fi, bottled water." Roscoe gestured toward darkness beyond the terminal. 5-minute walk. Vernon knew Section C. It was past rental car lots, poorly lit, isolated. Legitimate black car services used those spaces, but they waited with name cards at designated pickup points. They didn't hunt passengers at baggage claim. "Let me see your dispatch paperwork." Roscoe's corporate mask slipped for a microsecond. Something cold and calculating flickered behind the professional veneer. "Paperwork's in the vehicle, sir. Company policy." "Then we'll go get it." "Look, Vernon." The use of his first name felt like a violation. "I've got other executives waiting. Your choice, professional service or roll the dice with taxi roulette." Vernon felt his 56 years like a physical weight. His back throbbed, exhaustion pulled at his judgment. But 28 years of marriage had taught him to trust Diane's voice in his head. When someone pushes too hard, they want something you shouldn't give. "Thanks, but no." Roscoe's smile died completely. "That's unfortunate." The corporate facade cracked, revealing something predatory underneath. Vernon realized with sick clarity what this was. Roscoe had been watching business travelers, studying patterns, learning names from luggage tags, and overheard phone calls, targeting tired middle-aged men traveling alone. "Kansas City's dangerous after midnight," Roscoe said quietly, stepping closer. "A lot of predators out there. Hate to see something happen to a family man." The threat hung between them like poison gas. Vernon's hands trembled, but he kept his voice steady. "Excuse me." He tried to step around Roscoe, but the man moved with him, blocking his path with practiced ease. This wasn't improvisation. Roscoe had done this before. "Section C, space 14, Roscoe whispered. "Gray suburban with tinted windows. You change your mind, that's where I'll be. But my patience has limits." Vernon pushed past him toward the taxi line, skin crawling. The dispatcher looked up as he approached, a tired woman who'd probably seen everything. "Ma'am, I need help. That man approached me claiming corporate pickup I never arranged. He knows my name, employer, home address. Something's very wrong." Her demeanor shifted instantly. She pressed her radio, spoke rapid security codes. Within seconds, 2 guards were moving toward the executive lot. Vernon's legitimate taxi arrived. Proper medallion, displayed permits, driver's license on the partition. As they pulled away, he glimpsed flashing lights in Section C and a gray Suburban surrounded by security vehicles. At home, Diane was waiting in her kitchen robe, relief flooding her face. She didn't ask about the delay. Wives knew when questions could wait. That night, Vernon dreamed of tinted windows and corporate smiles that revealed rows of shark teeth. He woke twice, checking door locks, listening to familiar house sounds that meant safety. Morning brought a small Kansas City Star item. Airport security detains man operating unlicensed transportation service in connection with ongoing investigation into missing business travelers. No names, no details, just a reminder to use official services. Vernon read it 3 times over coffee, thinking about the gray Suburban and wondering how many executives hadn't made it home. He thought about exhaustion clouding judgment, about predators who studied their prey, about the razor-thin line between a safe arrival and becoming another missing person statistic. He called Diane from his hotel that night, every night for the rest of his career.